Hi everyone, welcome to the Virtual Strategist. My name's Erica Olson. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AgileStrategy. Today's whiteboard video is on Agile road mapping. This is part of our series on Agile strategy or Agile strategic planning. We have a 4-part framework: roadmaps, Agile roadmaps, strategy sprints, health metrics, and weekly health check-ins or metric Mondays. So let's talk about Agile road mapping and what it is. To be clear, we're zooming in to your one-page strategic plan. So this is a piece of your one-page strategic plan, which has, of course, your mission, why you exist, where you are today, your current state, your SWOT, and most importantly, where you're going, that vision or that future state. So Agile roadmaps are different because instead of timelines, which are pretty standard, normally your roadmap would have year 1, year 2, and year 3, we're shifting from timelines to triggers or trigger events. And I'm going to double click into that in just a second, but let's talk through everything else here first. So not only are we saying the roadmap is based on trigger events, those trigger events are maps to a phase. So we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We love 3-part roadmaps. Why not have them? A tip or trick, name your phases. Might be kind of nice. That helps your organization stay anchored to what phase you're in. So we identify trigger events. Within that phase, we have shifts, so strategic shifts you are making or have to make in order to react and respond to the phase. And then, of course, what are your priorities organizationally within that phase? So this is a pretty simple roadmap, a swim lane for trigger events, a swim lane for shifts, and then a swim lane for priorities. So what are trigger events? So trigger events come in two parts, or 2 types, if you will. There are external or market trigger events, and then there are internal trigger events or performance trigger events. So neither is good or bad, they're just different. What matters and super important is that the trigger event is verifiable. Objective and verifiable. If it's not objective and verifiable, it won't work and your team will get super confused. You need to know objectively that said event puts you squarely in a specific phase. So for example, the phase that you're currently in may have the trigger event that there's flat GDP or flat gross domestic product growth. That is an objective, verifiable event, right? A trigger event. You're shifting into the next phase potentially if housing starts start to increase. That's an example of an external or market trigger event. And a market trigger event matters in terms of what's driving your business. So housing starts might not drive your business. What drives your business? What's an indicator within your market that things are shifting or changing? This is just an example, potentially if you're in construction. And then maybe you're shifting into phase 3 when you've seen 2 consistent periods, maybe it's months or maybe it's quarters, depends on the pace of your business, of growth. Maybe that's when you're shifting into the next phase. So you can have a mixture of external and internal, it doesn't really matter. And then, what's super important is just what has to shift and change strategically in your organization when you're in this phase. So for example, if you're a construction business, housing starts start to increase. Again, maybe it's 2 periods of increase or something, 3, 4, whatever you're comfortable with. And maybe that's a leading indicator, an early warning sign of a market recovery for you, hypothetically. Your shift would be ramping operations. Maybe you moved to fully digital, now you're ramping operations, and then you're expanding. That's just an example. And then what are the handful of priorities that your team needs to align around within said phase? So that's an Agile roadmap. Let's just wrap it up with a couple of tips. So I said shifting from time frames to trigger events is the magic of an Agile roadmap, and it is. However, we know that finance and budget need time frames. So if you can add some months here if that really helps you, but just use them as guidelines, not as actual, timelines in your roadmap. Let's stick with phases instead of years. Okay, the other thing is you might consider mapping to strategic goals. So instead of having loose priorities here, you might actually have specific rows here for your long-term goals. So you have clear priorities within each goal. That keeps the long-term and the short-term connected. And then lastly, it's not a light switch. It's entirely possible that you're in between a couple of phases, so you start to work on things here, but you're not totally moved over into phase 2. So don't debate that. It's not really worth it. Just remember this is directional, not like concrete and specific. So with that, that's how you shift from a standard roadmap to an Agile roadmap. Check out the rest of our videos for the other components of our framework. Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so. Check us out on Facebook, subscribe to our newsletter. Happy strategizing.